Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Metal video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the Ultimate Clash, the Special Edition Part 1, Worldwide Celebration Part 1 Ultimate Clash, and basically how you can beat every single boss. So we'll talk about each boss, show you my team for them, then skip on over to the next one. I'll also do a review at the end, a very brief recap of the teams. There are the normal amount of bosses in total, 10, so you should have a pretty decent time. Obviously, depends on your box, but for me, overall, this one was definitely easier than the standard Virtual Dokkan Ultimate Clash. So if you struggled with Virtual Dokkan Ultimate Clash in the past, try this one, it is a little bit easier. Now, in terms of the first fight, keeping it very, very simple, we're going to go Team Bardock. A large reason is, so all of these fights, pretty much all of them are susceptible to sealing, which is very, very important, and a lot of them don't actually have a lot of gimmicks. So these first couple fights we can actually clear with partial teams. You may need a little bit of luck with where the Cybermen fall, but generally speaking, the reason we do this is because it saves units for us to use later. You may not need them later, but you can get unlucky. You never know what could happen. For the other Dr. Wheelo, we're going to be using the Ginyu Force. Again, nothing crazy here. The unit's immune to stunning, attack lowering, but sealing will work effectively. This will be a common trend throughout most, if not the entire Virtual Dokkan Ultimate Clash. So obviously that's the first kind of round, or the first two bosses of the first round taken out. It's a little bit different to a traditional Virtual Dokkan Ultimate Clash. Most Virtual Dokkan Ultimate Clashes only have two bosses in the first round. This one we have 3. Here we have Piccolo and Goku. They don't seem to have any distinct gimmick. You can attack and defense lower them, which is great, but they don't seem to have anything that I noticed. They don't have multiple super attacks. They don't do anything of note. They didn't seem to dodge, although someone might come and say something. So if you do notice anything that I miss or I just didn't pick up during my run, please obviously mention it as well. Of course, here we're using a strength-only team. Extreme Strength seems to handle everything quite fine. We don't have a sealer, but the brute strength of our free-to-play options and our summonable options overall kind of gets us through. You've got lots of Wicked Bloodlines units here, so that's generally the trend. Wicked Bloodlines, Terrifying Conquerors that you get to go through to obviously clear this. Moving on to stage 2, we are facing Turles and then Lord Slug. Turles immune to stunning, attack and defense, lowering damage reduction. Again, doesn't seem to have anything noticeable on this essay. Didn't seem to stun us either, although it may be a chance to stun. So it could very much be a chance to stun attack. Here we'll be using Extreme AGL. No specific reason. I think you could use Super or Extreme AGL. The reason I used Extreme AGL is because I believe my Extreme AGL is slightly worse off than my Super. It also allows me to use some handy units like Dr. Wheelo, who benefit against Saiyan characters, in general, same with Baby. So it's just a nice situational thing that allows us to spike some damage, and that's pretty much it, really. Next, we move on to Lord Slug. Now, same as Turles, immune to stunning, attack and defense reduction, and obviously as well, also, reduces damage received. I assumed he would have healing. Doesn't seem to be the case. So there's no healing mechanic. Usually Namekians have a healing mechanic of some kind. He did not seem to have one, at least one that was noticeable. I didn't see him heal, so that's one of those things. So it seems like just an easier version of the usual Lord Slug that we deal with, to be honest. So Lord Slug and Turles out the way, we now move on to the final boss for stage 2. Again, so far so good. These are very much diminished in difficulty from the traditional Virtual Dokkan Ultimate Clash. So now we move on to this one. Obviously the final boss here is going to be the Goku. Now I assumed, so Goku obviously immune to stunning, attack and defense lowering, reduces damage. I assumed Goku had an AoE super. I unfortunately did not see his super attack. Just because of the strength of the free-to-play Goku, Bulma, and Krillin unit, who did an amazing job, basically one-shotting Goku, essentially. But I would wager that he probably has an AoE super attack. I can only imagine that is the case. But again, to each their own. Maybe someone will be able to comment, but I feel like he does. Just because the unit would make sense as the final boss of stage 2 to be that way. Next, we move on to stage 3. So in stage 3, we face another set of 3 bosses before we take on the final one. So we'll start off with Cooler, and our Cooler on paper looks very similar to round 2, but what Cooler does is he does lower your defense on the super. So immune to stunning, attack and defense lowering, etc., reduces damage, but he lowers your defense with the super. So it's actually quite a big deal. He can actually do some decent damage to you. So you want to take units with evasion, a little bit of damage reduction, and those tend to work out fine. I find Paikuhan's a great source of sealing as long as you get a rainbow orb, and you can use Goku and Harale if you want to as a floating sealer. But generally speaking, Margarita is also a pretty solid option. Cooler did actually do damage to me through that defensive reduction, which is why I say you should consider damage reduction or evasion or something a bit more robust to get you through, because you do want to get the seal off on him. When we take on Metal Cooler, didn't notice anything too stringent with him. Didn't notice double supers, didn't notice anything. We used a strength team. He felt relatively tanky, though. Felt a little bit tankier than the other units, that's for sure. But again, immune to stunning, immune to attack and defense lowering. The standard protocol, one might say, of a difficult unit in Dokkan. Make them immune to everything. In this case, obviously, sealing helps, but we don't have any of that. We're not too concerned about that either. Of course, we are mainly going to focus on, at this point, just kind of nuking him through with our stronger options. Fortunately, you have some very nice options, especially in terms of tanking for super strength. Then finally, Android 13 before we take on the final boss. So Android 13, pretty cool, pretty straightforward again, immune to stunning, sealing, etc. Nothing too crazy here either. I think he lowers defense on attack, but nothing too wild. I don't think he can miss, is maybe his thing, but it doesn't seem like he has guaranteed hit. So definitely didn't feel like there's anything too crazy there. I went Pure Saiyans, Hybrid Saiyans. Obviously, if you have SSBE Vegeta, that tends to help a lot, but you need a sealer. So sealing comes in a lot of great shapes and sizes here. We do have, obviously, SS3 Bardock that we're going to be using, but we also have that great Saiyan that we can use, which is helpful if you're going for a different variant of the team. You've got Emperor Brienne, who can also seal, so there are some decent options overall in terms of, obviously, sealing him and controlling him. He does hit relatively hard with his super, but I think for the most part you should be good to go as long as a tankier unit tanks it, I think you'll be fine. And then finally we come down to the Super Saiyan Trio. So talking about the Super Saiyan Trio, obviously they are Int type, which is fine. We should have 2 physical teams. You should have your super physical and your extreme physical at this point. Again, sealing is going to help you. A great source of sealing is the free-to-play Martian Brew and Babdi on the extreme side. Generally speaking, they're pretty solid. You also have some very strong SEAs that are available with redstones if you need. There's also just been some strong EZAs on extreme physical that makes it a very solid team to bring through support, synergy, orb changing, and just like the whole roster of units that you can use. Very nice and solid. In terms of super physical, I think things are still pretty strong. You have Great Saiyan 1 and 2 as a free-to-play sealing option. You've obviously got some really strong characters in the form of the Yamcha Puar. You've got Master Roshi, full power that you can use for sealing. You also obviously have Krillin, the free-to-play LR. You've got some decent options. The reason I went extreme, it just feels stronger to me. Extreme physical right now between the Buuhan, the Buu, the Kid Buu, the Goku Blacks, the the androids, just good units, just very strong units. Now, how these guys work is, so they boost their attack based on the amount of super attacks they do, and also the type of super attacks that you hit them with. On top of that as well, they also fire off multiple super attacks. So they fire more than 1 super attack per turn. So you need to have units that are relatively tanky across the board, or you need to have some kind of regen, health, restore kind of situation. You're not going to be able to get through this. It's not that big of a slog of a fight. Again, the difficulty feels largely reduced to a normal Virtual Dokkan Ultimate Clash, but they still did some decent damage. I mean, this is a strong, extreme physical team as well. Yeah, and like, you could take damage for sure. I think, look, ultimately at the end of the day, of course, a lot's going to just depend on your box, but if you can get the seal off, generally in most of these fights you're okay. Especially in this fight, I would say sealing them is probably the most important, just because of the premise that without sealing them, what tends to happen is you tend to end up getting kind of locked against these multiple supers, and they do hit you for decent damage. I mean, here you can see Kidbu took a decent chunk there. It wasn't a minimal amount of damage. Goku Black, he's going to get quite a few orbs. He's going to get hit a couple times. I think he still takes 40k, so it feels like they're hitting in like the, I want to say 600-ish mark range overall. Like I feel like that's where they're hitting, but again, to each their own. It's going to depend on your box, so just adjust accordingly, but make sure you bring a sealer. As long as you do that for most of these fights, I think a lot of the times you're good to go. I think you tend to be more than fine. You tend to cope very well. I think you tend to do a good job. I think it's when you don't. I think it's when you don't bring the requisite units that I think you'll struggle, if that makes sense. But yeah, honestly, overall, not really anything too much that any of these units really do too crazily. I think looking now, I'm just doing a quick search up. So there are some more special gimmicks, some special gimmicks. Dr. Wheelo can seal you, very interesting. The Goku and Piccolo, they raise their attack and defense on their super. Turles doesn't really do much. Lord Slug lowers your defense on super. The Goku does not do an AoE super attack, but he does greatly raise his attack. Then we have the Metal Cooler, lowers your attack and defense, not anything too major. Massively lowers defense and high chance of stunning for Android 13. And then for these Super Saiyan trios, they just raise their attack and defense on their super, so pretty straightforward. Honestly speaking, it was a pretty good Ultimate Clash. It didn't feel too hectic, didn't feel too bad. Felt solid-ish in terms of difficulty. Maybe a little bit easier compared to what we're normally used to, but I think it's good. I think it'll give new players an incentive. I really think if you get some good summons in the WWC, or you're still building your box, eventually you should be able to get through this and net yourself a good chunk of stones. But yeah, that's it from me. See you next time. Bye.